When Simone Carter stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 6:45 p.m. on a Saturday evening, wearing the most deliberately unflattering outfit she could assemble from the depths of her closet, where clothes went to die, an oversized gray hoodie with coffee stains from 3 weeks ago that she'd specifically avoided washing for this purpose, wrinkled cargo pants that hadn't fit properly since college and had permanent creases in all the wrong places, her natural hair unwashed and pulled into the messiest bun she could create without actually looking like she had a medical emergency. Her glasses instead of the contact lenses she normally wore because glasses made her look more serious and less approachable, according to her ex-fiancé, who'd had opinions about everything. Absolutely zero makeup on her beautiful dark brown skin that usually glowed with a careful skincare routine she'd perfected over years, but tonight was deliberately allowed to look tired and dull, preparing for the blind date her meddling sister Kendra had set up. Despite Simone's repeated insistence that she was perfectly happy being single and didn't need Kendra's interference in her personal life, she thought this was foolproof sabotage. That no man, especially not the sophisticated businessman named Marcus that Kendra had described with such enthusiasm over their weekly Sunday brunch, would want a second date with someone who looked like they'd given up on life entirely, like they'd stopped caring about basic grooming and self-presentation, like they were actively trying to repel any potential romantic interest through sheer force of terrible fashion choices. That she'd be home by 7:30, maybe 8 at the latest if the restaurant was slow with the check, back in her apartment watching Netflix with her cat Winston curled beside her, having successfully proven to Kendra that blind dates were a waste of time, and that Simone was simply not interested in dating anyone after Derek had destroyed her ability to trust that anyone could love her and her career simultaneously. But it wasn't foolproof sabotage that would end this dating experiment once and for all. It wasn't a plan that would work the way Simone had calculated with the same strategic thinking she applied to corporate litigation. It wasn't going to end the way she expected with a polished businessman taking one look at her deliberately terrible appearance and making excuses about early morning meetings or family emergencies or anything that would let him escape before appetizers arrived. Because Tyler Bennett, the 36-year-old elementary school teacher and single father of twin 7-year-old girls named Maya and Zoe, who'd been running late from his daughter's ballet recital where Maya had forgotten her ballet shoes, and Zoe had cried because she'd wanted to be the swan princess instead of just a regular swan, showed up to the restaurant 15 minutes late with glitter still sparkling in his brown hair from the craft project the twins had done while waiting for their turn to perform, a juice stain on his light blue shirt from where Zoe had spilled her apple juice in the car because she'd been demonstrating her arabesque, looking exhausted and apologetic and nothing like the sophisticated businessman Simone had been expecting, took one look at Simone's deliberately terrible appearance, at the stained hoodie and wrinkled cargo pants and messy bun and glasses, and said with genuine warmth and no hint of judgment, "You look comfortable, I like comfortable," after spending 6 hours in dress pants and a tie watching tiny humans dance. Comfortable sounds amazing. And when Simone tried to be boring by giving one-word answers to his questions, when she tried to be rude by checking her phone constantly and sighing dramatically, when she deployed every defensive mechanism she'd developed over 8 months of determined singlehood, Tyler just laughed with the easy amusement of someone who spent his days with 7-year-olds and couldn't be fazed by adult rudeness. Asked her opinion on the best way to get slime out of carpet because Maya had decided to make homemade slime last weekend, and it had ended exactly as badly as he'd predicted. But she'd been so excited about the science experiment that he couldn't say no. Shared stories about his twins with the unself-conscious pride of a father who genuinely loved being a parent even when parenting was exhausting. And by the end of dinner, after 2 hours of conversation that flowed despite Simone's best efforts to make it painful, after Tyler had somehow made her laugh about the time both twins got lice at school, and he'd had to learn how to use a night comb while they cried about looking like boys if he cut their hair, after he'd asked thoughtful questions about her work as a corporate lawyer and seemed genuinely impressed by her recent promotion to partner rather than intimidated by her success, Simone realized with a sinking feeling that felt dangerously like hope that she'd accidentally fallen for the one man who saw past her armor, who looked at her deliberately terrible outfit and messy hair and defensive attitude and somehow saw the scared woman underneath who was terrified of being hurt again. If you believe that real love sees beyond appearances, that the right person will look past your walls and defensive mechanisms and terrible first date outfits to see who you actually are, that authentic connection matters more than perfect presentation. Please like this video right now, share it with someone who needs this message about vulnerability and second chances, and comment below where you're watching from, because every like and share helps stories about authentic connection reach people who've built walls around their hearts, who are protecting themselves from pain, but might also be protecting themselves from love, who need to know that sometimes the person who sees past your armor is exactly the person you need. Simone Carter was 31 years old and a corporate lawyer who'd recently made partner at Harrison & Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. The kind of accomplishment that most people achieved in their late 30s or early 40s, but that Simone had reached through sheer determination and countless 80-hour weeks and sacrificing most of her personal life to professional achievement. Her ex-fiancé Derek had broken up with her 8 months ago, had ended their 3-year relationship on the same day she'd gotten the promotion she'd been working towards since law school, had told her over dinner at the expensive restaurant where she thought they were celebrating her success that she was too intimidating and too career-obsessed, and that he needed someone who would prioritize him over her job. The breakup had happened the same day as her promotion, which meant the best professional day of her life had simultaneously been one of the worst personal days. Meant that making partner was forever associated with Derek telling her that her ambition made her unlovable, that her success made her threatening, that no man would want a woman who worked more hours than he did and earned more money and cared more about closing deals than about making dinner reservations. She hadn't dated since Derek had left, had spent 8 months throwing herself even deeper into work because work was something she could control. Work was something where effort produced predictable results. Work was something that wouldn't tell her she was too much of everything good and not enough of everything traditional. Her sister Kendra had been trying to set her up for months, kept insisting that Simone couldn't hide in her corner office forever, that being professionally successful didn't mean accepting personal loneliness, that Derek had been wrong about everything, and Simone deserved someone who celebrated her ambition instead of being threatened by it. Simone had finally agreed to this blind date just to get Kendra off her back, had said yes after Kendra's 15th attempt at matchmaking, just so Kendra would stop sending her articles about how career women could still find love and TED Talks about vulnerability. But Simone had agreed with absolutely no intention of giving it a real chance, had planned this sabotage strategy the moment Kendra had mentioned setting her up with Marcus, a sophisticated businessman who supposedly appreciated ambitious women. Tyler Bennett was 36 years old and an elementary school teacher at Lincoln Elementary, where he taught second grade, which meant his days were filled with 7-year-olds who needed help with multiplication tables and conflict resolution and bathroom trips, which meant his salary was a fraction of what Simone earned, But his job satisfaction was probably infinitely higher because 7-year-olds thought he was the smartest person alive and occasionally brought him drawings of him as a superhero. He was a single father to twin girls, Maya and Zoe, who were 7 years old and had their mother's blonde hair and their father's brown eyes and personalities that were simultaneously identical and completely different in ways that kept Tyler constantly entertained and occasionally exhausted. His wife Sarah had died 3 years ago after a brutal 2-year battle with breast cancer that had started when the twins were 4. Had died despite every treatment and every prayer and every bargain Tyler had tried to make with the universe, had left him alone with 2 little girls who asked when mommy was coming home and cried at bedtime and needed a kind of emotional support that Tyler had to learn to provide, while also processing his own grief. He hadn't dated since Sarah's death, hadn't even considered it because dating felt like betrayal somehow. Like admitting Sarah was really gone, like he was trying to replace someone irreplaceable. And because bringing someone new into Maya and Zoe's lives felt like an enormous risk when they'd already lost one parent. His brother had convinced him to try, had told him that Sarah would want him to be happy, that 3 years was long enough to grieve, that the twins needed to see him living and not just surviving. That going on one blind date didn't mean he was forgetting Sarah or replacing her, but just meant he was allowing himself the possibility of connection again. Tyler had finally agreed mostly to stop his brother's well-meaning interference, had said yes to this blind date with the caveat that it was just casual coffee, nothing serious, just practicing conversation with an adult who wasn't discussing Pokemon or asking him to help find their missing homework. He was running late from the twins' ballet recital, from the chaos of getting 2 7-year-olds dressed in tutus and tights and ballet shoes that one of them had forgotten until they were already at the studio, from the performance that had run over schedule because tiny humans dancing was adorable but not exactly efficient, from the snack stop afterward because both girls were starving and refused to accept that dinner would be soon. He was nervous about dating again in ways he hadn't expected, kept thinking about what to talk about and whether to mention Sarah immediately or wait, and how to explain that he had kids without scaring off whoever this woman was that his brother had set him up with. Kendra had set up the blind date with the casual manipulation of someone who believed she knew what was best for everyone, had told Simone she was meeting Marcus, a sophisticated businessman who worked in finance and appreciated ambitious women and wouldn't be intimidated by a successful lawyer, had described him as exactly the kind of man Simone should be dating, which was precisely why Simone had decided to sabotage the entire evening. Kendra had told Tyler through his brother that this was just casual coffee with a friend's sister, someone nice named Simone who worked in law, nothing serious, just a chance to remember how to have adult conversation, had deliberately understated the situation because she knew Tyler would never agree to an actual date, knew he needed to be tricked into giving this a chance. Both had been misinformed deliberately because Kendra believed that sometimes people needed to be pushed toward happiness they were too scared to pursue on their own, that Simone and Tyler were both hiding from connection for different reasons, but would be perfect for each other if she could just get them in the same room. The date was scheduled at Giovanni's, a casual Italian restaurant at 7 p.m. on Saturday. The kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles, and good pasta that didn't require fancy clothes or uncomfortable shoes. Simone had arrived dressed terribly on purpose, had walked into the restaurant in her stained hoodie and cargo pants and messy bun, had told the hostess she was meeting someone, and had been directed to a table by the window where she'd sat down and arranged herself to look as unapproachable as possible, slouching in her chair and checking her phone, and preparing to be so unpleasant that Marcus would end this date before the breadsticks arrived. Tyler had arrived late and disheveled from the ballet recital, had rushed in 15 minutes past 7, with apologies ready and glitter still in his hair, had looked around the restaurant for whoever he was supposed to be meeting, and had seen Simone sitting alone looking deliberately uncomfortable, and had thought that she looked exactly like someone who didn't want to be here, which was something he understood completely. Have you ever deliberately tried to push someone away because you were scared of getting hurt, only to discover they weren't going anywhere? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. At 7 p.m. exactly, Simone had arrived at Giovanni's Italian restaurant dressed in her carefully selected terrible outfit, the stained hoodie and wrinkled cargo pants and messy bun that she'd spent 20 minutes making look like she hadn't spent any time on it at all, had walked through the door with her glasses sliding down her nose and her phone already in hand as prop for ignoring whoever this Marcus person turned out to be. Her sabotage plan was simple, and she'd rehearsed it mentally during the drive over. Look terrible enough that any sophisticated businessman would be horrified at first sight. Be boring enough that conversation would die painful death within 10 minutes. Give one-word answers to any questions. Check her phone constantly to signal disinterest. Leave early claiming headache or work emergency or any excuse that would end this disaster before dessert. She expected to meet Marcus, the sophisticated businessman that Kendra had described with such enthusiasm, probably wearing expensive suit and Italian shoes and watch that cost more than Simone's monthly rent, probably the kind of man who dated women who wore designer dresses and perfect makeup and had personal stylists, the kind of man who would take one look at Simone's deliberately awful appearance and make polite excuses about early morning meetings before vanishing into the night. She thought he'd be horrified and leave within 15 minutes, thought this whole evening would be over by 7:30, with Simone victorious in her mission to prove to Kendra that blind dates were a terrible idea and that Simone was better off alone with her cat and her career. At 7:15 p.m., after Simone had been sitting alone for 15 minutes, starting to worry that she'd been stood up, which would actually be perfect outcome for her sabotage plan, Tyler Bennett rushed into the restaurant looking nothing like the sophisticated businessman Kendra had described, rushed in 15 minutes late and clearly flustered, his brown hair disheveled and catching the restaurant's lighting in a way that revealed glitter, sparkling throughout like he'd been attacked by craft supplies. His light blue dress shirt wrinkled with what was clearly a juice stain on the collar, in a shape that suggested a spill rather than intentional design. He looked exhausted in the way that parents of young children always look exhausted, that particular bone-deep tiredness that comes from spending hours supervising tiny humans who have endless energy and no sense of appropriate volume control. But he was smiling apologetically as he approached Simone's table. "I'm so sorry I'm late," Tyler said, slightly out of breath like he'd been running. The twins' ballet recital ran longer than expected, and then Maya couldn't find her ballet shoes, and Zoe cried because she wanted to be the swan princess instead of just a regular swan, and it was a whole thing. I should have texted, but I was driving, and then I got here as fast as I could. Simone stared at him in confusion, her carefully prepared, hostile demeanor momentarily disrupted by the word that had just entered the conversation. "You have children," she said, the statement somewhere between question and accusation, because this was definitely not the sophisticated businessman Kendra had described. This was clearly a harried single parent covered in glitter and juice stains, and Kendra had definitely not mentioned anything about children or ballet recitals or anyone named Marcus having twins. "Did my brother not mention that?" Tyler asked, looking equally confused, as he pulled out the chair across from Simone and sat down. "Because I specifically told him to make sure whoever he was setting me up with knew I had kids. It's kind of important information. And also, you're Simone, right? Because if you're not, this is going to be incredibly awkward. Simone's mind was processing the situation with the analytical speed she usually reserved for complex legal cases, cataloging facts that didn't match her expectations and trying to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't Marcus, this was Tyler, which meant Kendra had lied about the name for some reason, probably because Kendra was meddling in ways that went beyond simple matchmaking into territory of deliberate deception. This was a harried single dad who just admitted to having twins and who was clearly coming from a children's ballet recital based on the glitter evidence and the juice stain and the general air of someone who'd been wrangling small humans all day. He was late and disheveled in ways that suggested his lateness was genuine emergency rather than deliberate rudeness. Had glitter in his hair that sparkled under the restaurant lights in a way that would have been embarrassing on most adults, but somehow made him look approachable and real, seemed genuine rather than polished, apologetic rather than arrogant, tired rather than sophisticated. He wasn't horrified by her appearance, hadn't even blinked at the stained hoodie or the messy bun or the glasses, had actually sat down across from her and was looking at her with kind brown eyes that showed no judgment about her deliberately terrible outfit, wasn't running away or making excuses or showing any of the horror she'd expected to provoke. Her plan wasn't working at all. Tyler's reaction to Simone's outfit was the opposite of what she'd prepared for, what she'd spent 45 minutes assembling this disaster specifically to provoke. "You look comfortable," he said with genuine warmth, no sarcasm or judgment in his tone, just observation delivered like it was compliment. "I like comfortable. After chasing 7-year-olds all day and sitting through 2 hours of ballet recital in dress pants that are apparently not machine washable, according to the tag I ignored, comfortable sounds absolutely amazing. You've got the right idea." Simone tried to deploy her planned strategy of being boring, gave him one-word answer when he asked how her day had been. Just fine, delivered in flat monotone that should have killed conversation before it started. Tyler just laughed, not mocking laugh, but warm, amused sound of someone who recognized defensive mechanism when he saw it and wasn't deterred by it. "That good, huh?" he said. "I had a student tell me today that my tie looked like it was strangled by a rainbow, which I think was meant as compliment, but I'm not entirely sure. 7-year-olds are brutal fashion critics." He kept engaging despite Simone's monosyllabic responses, kept asking questions and sharing stories about his twins with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of parent who genuinely enjoyed parenting, even when it was exhausting. Asked her, "What's the best way to get slime out of carpet?" Because Maya decided last weekend that she wanted to be scientist and made homemade slime that ended up everywhere except where slime was supposed to be. And now there's green glitter slime embedded in our living room carpet. And I've tried everything short of replacing the entire carpet, which is starting to look like a viable option. At 7:30 p.m., 30 minutes into date that Simone had planned to end by now, conversation was flowing in ways that made Simone increasingly uncomfortable, because uncomfortable meant her armor was cracking, and she didn't want her armor to crack for someone she was supposed to be driving away. She tried to be rude, checked her phone constantly and sighed dramatically, and gave shortest possible answers to Tyler's questions, deployed every defensive tactic she perfected over 8 months of determined singlehood. Tyler just kept engaging, seemed completely unfazed by her rudeness, kept sharing stories about his twins with genuine affection that made Simone smile, despite her determination not to smile. He asked about her work with genuine interest that felt different from Derek's resentful tolerance of her career. asked what kind of law she practiced, and seemed actually impressed when she explained corporate litigation and her recent promotion to partner. "That's incredible," Tyler said. "Partner at 31? That's the kind of achievement that takes serious dedication. My brother's a lawyer too, and he's always complaining about the hours. I don't know how you do it." Simone found herself explaining cases she'd worked on, found herself talking about the intellectual challenge of complex litigation, found herself relaxing into conversation despite her intention to remain hostile and boring. She was starting to realize with growing alarm that he wasn't deterred by her terrible outfit or her defensive rudeness or her clear signals that she didn't want to be here, that he was actually nice in ways that seemed genuine rather than performed, that she was starting to enjoy this conversation despite her best efforts not to enjoy anything about this evening. This wasn't supposed to happen. Her carefully constructed plan was failing spectacularly. Her armor that had protected her for 8 months was developing cracks that let Tyler's kindness seep through. And she didn't know how to stop it without just standing up and leaving, which would be admitting defeat in a different way. Tyler revealed his own story with the same straightforward honesty he'd been showing all evening. No dramatic buildup or careful euphemisms, just facts delivered with the exhausted acceptance of someone who'd had 3 years to process grief but still felt its weight. "My wife died 3 years ago," he said. "Breast cancer, 2-year battle that we lost despite everything. And I've been raising the twins alone since then, which is why my brother basically forced me here tonight. Told me that Sarah would want me to start living again instead of just surviving. That the girls needed to see me as person with life beyond being their dad. This is my first date since Sarah died," Tyler continued, "and I'm honestly not sure I remember how to do this. How to talk to adults about things other than multiplication tables and lost lunchboxes. My brother said I need to start living again, but mostly I feel like I'm just trying to keep 2 7-year-olds alive and reasonably happy, while also teaching 23 other 7-year-olds how to read. So dating feels like luxury I'm not sure I have energy for. But he forced me here, and here I am, covered in glitter and juice stains and probably looking exactly like someone who shouldn't be dating because they're barely holding their regular life together." Simone felt her defensive walls crumbling further as Tyler's honesty demanded matching honesty from her, as his vulnerability made her own protective mechanisms feel silly and performative in comparison. "I dress like this on purpose," she admitted, the confession coming before she could stop it. "Wanted to sabotage this date so spectacularly that you'd leave and my sister would finally stop trying to set me up with people. Wore the worst outfit I could find and planned to be boring and rude until you made excuses and left. My ex-fiancé said I was too intimidating," Simone continued, words tumbling out now that she'd started. "Said I was too career-obsessed and too ambitious, and that's why he was leaving. Told me on the same day I made partner at my firm that no man would want woman who worked more hours than he did, and I haven't dated since then because apparently being successful makes me unlovable. So I agreed to this blind date just to get my sister off my back, but I had absolutely no intention of giving it real chance. Was planning to be home by 7:30 watching Netflix with my cat. I gathered that from the outfit," Tyler said with gentle smile that contained no judgment. "The inside-out hoodie was my first clue that something was deliberately wrong here." Simone looked down in horror and realized that yes, her hoodie was inside out. The tag was visible at her neck, and the seams were showing in ways that meant she'd been sitting here for 45 minutes, wearing her sabotage outfit inside out without noticing, which meant her terrible outfit was even more terrible than she'd intended. She felt her face burning with embarrassment, felt mortified in ways that made her want to leave immediately. "It's refreshing, actually," Tyler continued before Simone could spiral into complete mortification. Most people on blind dates spend so much energy pretending to be perfect version of themselves, pretending they're not nervous or scared or damaged by past relationships, pretending that dating is natural and easy instead of terrifying and complicated. You're honest about not wanting to be here, honest about being scared, honest about protecting yourself. And I appreciate that more than I can tell you because I'm scared too. And at least we can be scared together instead of pretending we're not. At 8 p.m., 1 hour into date that Simone had planned to end after 30 minutes maximum, they were still talking, had ordered food at some point, though Simone couldn't remember when, were sharing stories about their careers and their lives and their fears with honesty that felt dangerous and necessary simultaneously. They talked about the difference between being lawyer and being teacher, about how she argued cases in boardrooms while he taught second graders how to read, about how her job paid significantly more, but his job came with handmade thank you cards and artwork that called him best teacher ever in crayon. They talked about loss, about Tyler's wife dying after 2 years of fighting cancer that ravaged her body while their daughters were too young to understand why mommy was always tired, about Simone's engagement ending on the day she should have been celebrating professional achievement, about how both of them had built walls after being hurt, about how family pressure to move on felt simultaneously supportive and suffocating. They talked about being scared, about Tyler's fear of bringing someone into his daughters' lives who wouldn't stay, about Simone's fear that her ambition made her impossible to love, about how both of them had agreed to this date mostly to appease meddling family members, but neither had expected to actually want to be here. Simone found herself relaxing despite every intention to remain defensive, found herself laughing at Tyler's stories about his students and sharing stories about difficult clients and opposing counsel who'd underestimated her, found herself enjoying conversation with someone who seemed genuinely interested in who she was beneath the partner title and the defensive armor. Tyler was kind in ways that felt effortless rather than performed, was funny without trying too hard, was genuine in ways that made Simone's carefully constructed walls feel exhausting to maintain. And by the time their entrees arrived, she'd forgotten she was supposed to be sabotaging this evening and was just talking to someone who saw past her inside-out hoodie to the person underneath. At 8:30 p.m., 90 minutes into the date that Simone had planned to end, after 20 minutes of calculated unpleasantness, she realized with something approaching panic that the evening was going too well, that her sabotage had failed so completely she'd forgotten she was supposed to be sabotaging anything, that she actually liked Tyler in ways that terrified her, because liking someone meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant the possibility of being hurt again, the way Derek had hurt her. She liked his kindness and his humor, and the way he talked about his daughters with unself-conscious affection, liked how he'd asked about her work with genuine interest rather than Derek's thinly veiled resentment, liked that he seemed completely unbothered by her success and actually impressed by her achievements rather than threatened by them. But he had kids, twin 7-year-olds named Maya and Zoe, who were apparently obsessed with ballet and slime, and who called their father from school to tell him about playground drama. And Simone knew absolutely nothing about children beyond the fact that they were small and require significant amounts of attention and probably didn't appreciate when adults worked 80-hour weeks. Her career was demanding in ways that had destroyed her engagement, required late nights and weekend work and constant availability for client emergencies, required the kind of dedication that Derek had called obsessive and that had apparently made her too intimidating to love. This was complicated in ways that made Simone want to retreat back into the safety of her apartment with Winston the cat, who didn't require emotional vulnerability or fear of disappointing small humans who'd already lost one parent. Tyler seemed to read something in her expression, in the way her smile had become slightly fixed and her responses slightly more careful, seemed to recognize the moment when reality was intruding on the pleasant evening they'd been having. "I should be upfront about something," he said, his tone shifting from the easy warmth of the past 90 minutes to something more serious, something that suggested he'd been thinking about this all evening and had decided honesty was necessary, even if honesty might end whatever was developing between them. "Dating as a single dad is complicated in ways I probably should have explained before we ordered dessert, but I wanted to see if we actually liked each other before getting into the complicated parts. Maya and Zoe are my priority," Tyler continued. "Will always be my priority in ways that might not be fair to whoever I date, but that's just reality of being parent. There will be times when I have to cancel plans because one of them is sick or upset or just needs me. Times when my schedule revolves entirely around school pickups and soccer practice and parent-teacher conferences and pediatrician appointments. I can't do casual dating, don't have time for it, and more importantly, it wouldn't be fair to my daughters to bring someone into our lives who isn't planning to stick around, who's just passing through while figuring out what they actually want." "They've lost their mom," Tyler said, his voice rough with emotion that 3 years hadn't fully processed. "Lost her when they were 4 and barely remember her beyond stories I tell them and pictures we look at together. And I won't bring someone into their lives who won't stay because they can't lose another person who matters, can't handle another abandonment, can't survive another person disappearing from their world. So I need to be clear that if this," he gestured between them, "if this becomes something, it comes with 2 7-year-olds who will need to like you and trust you and eventually depend on you. And that's a lot to ask on a first date where you wore an inside-out hoodie specifically to drive me away." "That's a lot of pressure," Simone said, the words coming out more sharply than she'd intended. Defensive walls rebuilding themselves as quickly as they'd crumbled during dinner. "That's a lot to put on someone after 90 minutes of conversation. I came here planning to sabotage this date and go home alone. And now you're talking about your daughters needing to trust me and me potentially becoming part of their lives. And I don't know anything about kids. I've never even babysat. I'm a corporate lawyer who works 70 hours a week and can barely keep a cat alive." "I know," Tyler said, "and I'm sorry, I don't mean to overwhelm you or pressure you or make this heavier than a first date should be. But I like you, Simone, more than I expected to like anyone, especially someone wearing cargo pants and an inside-out hoodie. More than I've liked anyone since Sarah died. And I need to be honest about what dating me actually means before we get further into this and someone gets hurt because expectations weren't clear. Even in that terrible hoodie that you wore specifically to make me leave, even with your messy bun and your glasses and your one-word answers that were supposed to bore me into making excuses, I saw you, saw the brilliant, scared woman underneath all the defensive armor, and I want to see you again. I want to see you again at whatever pace works for both of us," Tyler continued. "Don't need to meet the twins tomorrow or next week or even next month. We can take this slow and figure out if this is something real before introducing complications of children and careers and coordinating schedules around ballet recitals. But I needed you to know up front that if this does become something, it becomes something that includes 2 7-year-olds who will eventually need to be part of the equation. And if that's too much or too complicated or too scary, I understand. I'll pay for dinner and we can part as friends and you can go home to your cat and tell your sister that blind dates don't work." Simone felt torn between the part of her that wanted to run back to the safety of her carefully controlled single life and the part of her that recognized Tyler as someone worth the risk of vulnerability. Someone who'd seen past her armor and liked what he'd found. Someone who was being honest about complications rather than hiding them until they became problems. "I like you too," she admitted, the words feeling dangerous because admitting feelings meant giving someone power to hurt you. "But I don't know anything about kids beyond the fact that they're small and require attention and probably don't appreciate when adults prioritize work over everything else, which is exactly what I do, because that's what being partner requires. My career is demanding in ways that destroyed my last relationship," Simone continued. "Requires late nights and weekends and constant availability for client emergencies. Requires the kind of dedication that my ex-fiancé called obsessive and that apparently made me too intimidating to love. What if I'm not good at this? What if I meet your daughters and they don't like me, or I don't know how to talk to them, or I say the wrong thing and upset them? What if I'm as bad at relationships as Derek said I was? What if I hurt them the way I apparently hurt him by caring too much about my career?" "What if you are good at this?" Tyler asked gently. "What if you're not as bad at relationships as someone who was threatened by your success told you that you were? What if you meet my daughters and figure out how to talk to them the way you figured out how to win cases in courtrooms? What if you're capable of more than you give yourself credit for because you're judging yourself by the standards of someone who wanted you to be smaller and less ambitious and more focused on making him comfortable? Your ex-fiancé was wrong about you being too intimidating, was wrong about your career making you unlovable, was wrong about basically everything from what I can tell after 90 minutes of conversation. So maybe he was also wrong about you being incapable of balance. They agreed to take it slow, to see each other again without the immediate pressure of meeting Maya and Zoe, to figure out if what they'd felt during dinner was real connection or just the novelty of someone understanding their particular brands of damage. They agreed not to introduce children into the equation until they were both sure this was something substantial, until Simone had time to process what dating a single father actually meant, and Tyler had time to be sure she was someone he wanted in his daughters' lives. They agreed to be honest with each other about fears and schedules and the complications that came with merging two lives that had been carefully reconstructed after different kinds of loss. As Tyler walked Simone to her car, the evening air cool against skin that felt warm from wine and conversation, he took her hand with the tentative uncertainty of someone who hadn't held anyone's hand in 3 years and wasn't sure he remembered how. "Thank you for being honest about the hoodie," he said. "I appreciate knowing you were actively trying to drive me away. Makes me feel special that you accidentally liked me anyway." Simone laughed despite herself, despite the fear and uncertainty, and the voice in her head that sounded like Derek telling her she was too much of everything wrong. "I wasn't supposed to like you," she admitted, "was supposed to be home an hour ago proving to my sister that blind dates were a terrible idea." 1 week later, Simone stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 6:30 p.m. on a Saturday evening, wearing actual nice clothes, a deep purple dress that fit properly and had never been worn inside out, her natural hair styled into fine curls instead of messy bun, contact lenses instead of glasses, makeup applied with the care of someone who was actually trying to look attractive instead of deliberately terrible. She'd spent 45 minutes getting ready, the same amount of time she'd spent last week making herself look awful. But this time the effort went in the opposite direction, went toward presenting herself as someone who was willing to try, who was willing to be vulnerable, who was willing to show up as her actual self, rather than defended version designed to push people away. Tyler noticed immediately when he picked her up for their second date. his eyes widening with appreciation that made Simone feel seen in ways that had nothing to do with expensive clothes and everything to do with someone recognizing the significance of her effort. "You look beautiful," he said, voice warm with genuine admiration. "Though I have to admit I was kind of fond of the hoodie. It had character, really made a statement about your commitment to sabotage." Simone laughed, felt herself relaxing into this version of herself that was allowed to try, allowed to want connection, allowed to hope that maybe Derek had been wrong about everything. "I decided to try," she said simply, decided that maybe sabotage wasn't the best strategy for finding happiness, decided that maybe you were worth showing up for properly. 2 months after their second date, where Simone had shown up in a purple dress instead of an inside-out hoodie, after 8 weeks of dinners and movies and long phone conversation that stretched past midnight, after Tyler had told his daughters that he'd met someone special and wanted them to meet her when she was ready, Simone finally agreed to meet Maya and Zoe at the park on a Saturday afternoon. The most casual, low-pressure environment Tyler could arrange, where 7-year-olds could be themselves, and Simone could retreat if overwhelmed by the reality of dating someone with children. She'd brought them books because that was her instinct when facing unknown situation, had gone to the children's section of the bookstore, and spent an hour selecting age-appropriate titles that the helpful clerk had assured her second graders would love. Had wrapped them carefully and carried them to the park like talismans against the possibility of disappointing 2 little girls who'd already lost one important woman in their lives. The twins were curious but cautious, studied Simone with identical brown eyes that assessed her the way children assess all adults who enter their father's life, trying to determine if she was safe, if she was kind, if she was someone who would stay, or someone who would leave the way their mother had left, even though leaving hadn't been her choice. "Are you Dad's girlfriend?" Maya asked with a directness that 7-year-olds wielded like superpower, cutting through adult euphemisms to the question that mattered. "We're friends," Simone answered carefully, unsure of the right response, unsure if admitting to more would scare them or if denying it would seem like lying. "Mom was Dad's friend first," Maya observed. Statement that carried weight Simone couldn't fully interpret, that seemed to be offering permission or warning or just fact that needed acknowledging. "Your dad has told me a lot about your mom," Simone said gently. "She sounds like she was an amazing person, and I'm not trying to replace her. I'm just someone who cares about your dad and wants to get to know you both." 3 months later, after dozens of Saturday park visits and Wednesday pizza nights and careful integration into the Bennett family routines, Simone had become regular presence in Maya and Zoe's lives, had learned their schedules and preferences and the particular ways they processed emotions differently despite being identical twins. She helped with homework at the kitchen table while Tyler cooked dinner, discovered she was surprisingly good at explaining math concepts in ways that made sense to 7-year-olds who approach problems differently than adults approach them, found herself attending school events and sitting in audiences watching spring concerts and science fairs and parent appreciation breakfasts where she wasn't technically parent, but was treated like one by the twins who introduced her as Dad's friend Simone, who helps with homework and brings good books. She learned to braid hair through YouTube tutorials, watched at 11 p.m. after the girls had gone to bed, practiced on her own hair until her fingers remembered the patterns, surprised Maya one Saturday morning by offering to braid her hair the way Maya's friend's mother did, the intricate style that Tyler had never mastered despite 3 years of trying. The grateful wonder in Maya's eyes when Simone finished the braid made something crack open in Simone's chest, made her understand that love for children came gradually through accumulated moments of showing up, through braids and homework help and patient explanations of why bedtime existed even when it felt unfair. This was Tyler's family that she was building with him, becoming part of rather than creating from scratch. Learning to fit into spaces that had been shaped by Sarah's absence and Tyler's exhausted love, and two little girls' determination to keep living despite loss. 6 months after that first park meeting, after Simone had slowly become fixture in the Bennett household, had a drawer in Tyler's dresser and a toothbrush in his bathroom and a key to his house that she used 3 or 4 nights a week, Zoe had a nightmare that woke her screaming at 2 a.m. One of the dreams about her mother that still came occasionally. Dreams where Sarah was there and then wasn't. Where Zoe could almost touch her, but never quite reach her. Tyler was already moving toward Zoe's room when they both heard Zoe call out. Not for Daddy, but for Simone. Heard the 7-year-old who'd been cautious about accepting new people calling for someone who hadn't been in her life a year ago. Simone went to Zoe's room and climbed into bed beside the crying child, held her while she sobbed about the dream where Mommy had been singing, but then had faded away. Stroked her hair and murmured reassurances that the dream wasn't real, but the love was real, that her mother loved her even from heaven, that it was okay to be sad, that sadness meant you'd love someone enough that losing them hurt. She comforted Zoe with instincts she hadn't known she possessed, with gentleness that came from somewhere deeper than strategy or learned behavior, with love that had grown gradually through 6 months of showing up and braiding hair and helping with fractions. When Zoe finally fell back asleep, Simone returned to Tyler's room and realized with clarity that felt like revelation that she loved these girls. Loved them in ways that had nothing to do with their father and everything to do with who they were. Loved Maya's stubborn determination and Zoe's gentle sensitivity. Loved the way they fought over who got to sit next to Simone at dinner and how they both wanted her to read bedtime stories in the voices she did for different characters. This was her family now, not the family she'd imagined when she'd thought about future with Derek, not the traditional progression of engagement, then marriage, then children, but family nonetheless. Built from loss and courage and 2 little girls who'd chosen to trust her. 1 year after that first date where Simone had worn an inside-out hoodie and cargo pants and had planned to be home by 7:30, after 12 months of building relationship that had transformed from cautious dating into committed partnership, into something that felt permanent in ways neither of them had dared to hope for initially. Tyler took Simone back to Giovanni's Italian restaurant for dinner, requested the same table by the window where they'd sat that first night, the table where Simone had been prepared to sabotage everything, and Tyler had shown up covered in glitter and had refused to be deterred by her defensive armor. "You tried so hard to push me away," Tyler said after they'd ordered, after they'd laughed about how different this dinner was from their first dinner at this same table. "You wore the worst outfit you could find and gave one-word answers and checked your phone constantly and did everything possible to make me leave before appetizers arrived. But I saw past the inside-out hoodie and the messy bun and the defensive rudeness to the brilliant, scared, beautiful woman underneath. Saw someone who'd been hurt and was protecting herself the only way she knew how. Saw someone worth fighting for, even when she was fighting against connection. I saw the real you, Simone, and I fell in love with the real you. And I want to spend the rest of my life with the real you." He pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a ring that caught the restaurant light the same way it had caught light 1 year ago when everything had started, got down on one knee beside the table where Simone sat frozen with tears already streaming down her face. Before he could say anything else, Maya and Zoe appeared from wherever Tyler had hidden them, both wearing their best dresses and carrying bouquets of flowers, both grinning with the excitement of children who'd been keeping a secret. "Will you marry our dad?" Maya asked with her characteristic directness. "And will you be our mom?" Zoe added with the gentleness that balanced her sister's intensity. "Because we already love you, and we want you to stay forever." Simone was crying too hard to speak, could only nod as Tyler slipped the ring onto her finger, could only open her arms as both girls crashed into her in a hug that nearly knocked her off her chair, could only hold these three people who'd become her entire world in the years since she'd tried so hard to avoid exactly this. The wedding was a small ceremony 6 months later in the same botanical garden where Tyler and Sarah had married because Tyler wanted to honor Sarah's memory while building new future. Wanted the girls to understand that loving Simone didn't mean forgetting their mother. That hearts could hold multiple loves without any being diminished. Maya and Zoe served as flower girls, walking down the aisle in matching purple dresses they'd chosen themselves, scattering rose petals with a serious concentration of children who understood this moment mattered. Who understood this meant Simone was staying forever. Who'd already started calling her mom in private moments when they forgot to use her name. Kendra sat in the front row crying, whispered to anyone who would listen that this was the best meddling she'd ever done. That sometimes people needed to be pushed toward happiness they were too scared to pursue on their own. That she'd known from the start that Simone and Tyler would be perfect together if she could just get them in the same room. 2 years after the wedding, after Simone had officially adopted Maya and Zoe, and they'd all legally become the Bennett Carter family with hyphenated last name that honored both histories, Simone discovered she was pregnant with news that sent the twins into excited chaos about becoming big sisters, about teaching the new baby everything they knew, about how they'd help with bottles and diapers, and all the things they remembered from when their friends' younger siblings had been born. Tyler was teaching at the same elementary school that Maya and Zoe now attended, had the particular joy of seeing his daughters in the hallways and eating lunch with them occasionally, and watching them thrive in an environment where he could keep them close after years of worrying about them when they were out of sight. Simone had made senior partner at her firm, had somehow managed to balance demanding career with being present for family dinners and school events and bedtime stories, had discovered that Derek had been wrong about ambitious women being impossible to love, and that the right person didn't require her to be smaller or less successful, but celebrated her achievements while building life that had room for both professional ambition and family devotion. They'd found balance that looked different from what either had imagined, looked messy and complicated and absolutely perfect, looked like love that had survived deliberate sabotage and fear and loss, and had emerged stronger for having been tested. One Saturday morning, Simone was cleaning out the closet to make room for baby clothes, sorting through items that no longer fit or serve purpose, when she found the stained hoodie from that first date, the gray hoodie that had been worn inside out and had represented her last attempt at emotional armor. "Are you throwing that away?" Tyler asked, catching sight of the hoodie as Simone held it over the donation bag. "It's garbage," Simone replied. "It's stained and stretched, and I wore it inside out to deliberately look terrible. Why would I keep it?" "It's the hoodie that started everything," Tyler said, taking it from her hands. "It's the hoodie you wore when you were trying so hard to push me away. It's the hoodie that represented you being brave enough to show up even when you were terrified. Keep it." They ended up framing it in shadow box with a plaque underneath that read, "The worst first date outfit ever," hung it in their bedroom where they could see it every morning, where it served as a reminder of how far they'd come, of how Simone had tried to sabotage her own happiness and had accidentally found it anyway, of how Tyler had seen past defensive armor to the woman underneath. "Best failed plan I ever had," Simone said, looking at the framed hoodie with affection that would have seemed impossible a year ago. trying to drive you away and accidentally falling in love instead. Best night of my life, Tyler replied, pulling her close. Seeing you in that terrible outfit and knowing I wanted to see you in every outfit and no outfit for the rest of my life. When Simone Carter stood in front of her mirror, wearing the most deliberately unflattering outfit she could assemble to sabotage a blind date she'd never wanted, she thought looking terrible meant no second date. That cargo pants and unwashed hair and inside-out hoodie would repel any man her sister had chosen. That sophisticated businessman named Marcus would be horrified by her appearance and leave before appetizers. That she'd be home by 7:30, proving that dating was pointless after Derek had called her too intimidating and too career-obsessed, and had destroyed her ability to trust that anyone could love both her success and her vulnerability. But Tyler Bennett, elementary school teacher and single father covered in glitter from his daughter's ballet recital, took one look at her inside-out hoodie and deliberate disaster of an outfit and said comfortable is underrated with genuine warmth that suggested he meant it, asked her advice on removing slime from carpet because his twin daughters had decided to be scientists, shared stories about Sarah who died 3 years ago and left him raising 2 little girls alone, refused to be deterred by Simone's one-word answers or deliberate rudeness or defensive mechanisms or the fact that she'd clearly dressed to fail, because Tyler saw past armor to the brilliant, scared, beautiful woman underneath who'd been hurt by someone who'd wanted her to be smaller and less ambitious and more focused on making him comfortable instead of pursuing the partnership she'd earned through years of 80-hour weeks, saw someone who'd been told she was too much of everything good and had believed it enough to try to drive away anyone who might repeat that message, saw someone who was protecting herself the only way she knew how, but who deserved to be seen and loved and celebrated for exactly who she was beneath a terrible outfit in defensive posture. He saw potential for family where Simone saw complications, saw possibility where she saw risk, saw someone worth fighting for even when she was fighting against connection with every defensive mechanism she'd developed over 8 months of determined singlehood. And when Simone finally stopped sabotaging and started showing up as herself, when she wore the purple dress on their second date instead of cargo pants, when she met his daughters at the park with books and nervousness and determination to try, when she learned to braid hair through YouTube tutorials and helped with homework and attended school events and slowly became part of family that had been shaped by loss, when she discovered that love wasn't about being perfect, but about being present, about showing up consistently even when showing up was scary, about letting yourself be vulnerable with people who'd earned that vulnerability through patience and kindness, and refusing to be deterred by walls built from fear, she realized that sometimes the best things in life happen when our carefully constructed walls come down and let the right person see who we really are, beneath the terrible outfit in defensive posture and fear of being hurt again by someone who can't handle our success or our ambition or our refusal to be smaller than we are. If this story reminded you that real love sees beyond appearances, that the right person won't be scared away by your success or your walls or your worst outfit, that sometimes the person you're trying hardest to push away is exactly the person you need, then you know these messages need to reach people who are protecting their hearts so carefully. They're protecting themselves from happiness, who are building walls so high they're blocking out possibility, who need to know that vulnerability is strength and showing up imperfectly is better than not showing up at all. Have you ever sabotaged something good out of fear, worn your own version of an inside-out hoodie to push away someone who might have seen the real you, protected yourself so thoroughly from potential pain that you also protected yourself from potential joy? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from And rate this story from 0 to 10 because your engagement helps us understand that stories about tearing down walls and letting love in, despite fear, matter to you. Matter enough to share with others who are standing in front of their mirrors right now, preparing their own armor, and need to know that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is show up as yourself and let someone see past your defenses to the person you actually are underneath.